about it, don't need count. No, you can't relate to my pockets unless you broke for money count. The time and money, it took me 30 minutes, ran through 100,000. Start walking shit down at 15, there wasn't no more shooting the house. Turn 16 on with my Glock and bitch, my folks had kicked me out. Grandma stayed deep in Westwood, I ain't going to school, I ain't from that side. I had no choice, send me back to the south, now we at Central High. I'm 17, this 2017, Rico was still alive. So 7 days passed out to 10, don't forget when you felt that fire. I held my stick, tried to start hissing, I couldn't shoot cause I was shot. Look, it went in and out, but the blood wouldn't even start. 30, don't pull over, get straight to the hospital on my high. They check me in, try to wrap me up, start asking questions, I snuck out back in the truck, pick it back up, I need something done, I can't lay down. Hey, grabbing ski bags when you in my city, go pop out looking for Paul. Bullshit must love me, I'm always with it. When we stuff new, I'm packing a blunt. Finna fight a nigga, know him up in a minute. I stopped blue cause he just went platinum. Got M's in the teeth, new setup difference. Bitch, it ain't no fee next time. You the first one to pay attention. Ask me why I'm always quiet, so when I talk, you pay attention. Long trade ain't going on 4 years, shit still feel new, can't get no hit. I went got little T on my face when you see me. You right there, stop thinking about bro, shit cut me deep. Thought I was scarred, but that was deep. All the soft shit you'll never see. Pour a four just a dog in my head. Face everything came with the streets. Going out of G, they know I'm with it. Don't think you say cause you got chop on you, that bitch better have sex. I already set up his partner, they know that this shit get sticky. Championship racing on my middle finger. Match the butter on my penny. Killing shit dripping in fast. Mirror shoes fit a little different. I learned the game watching my OG know what dope up in the kitchen. Up the chopper, you ain't gon' blast. With all my men in position. Don't no member get left behind. Yeah, I'm bringing everybody with me. To all the ones in the sky, keep standing beside me till I feel. Some reason I keep on the slide. I can't let myself get dizzy. Bought a new baby Glock 9, took out the clip, slapped in the fit. I might get caught with your favorite rapper, baby mama with me. Went from hard from the hat to the soft, where I'm from, this shit drippin'. Miss the trick, dark as 8 cones. Grab a cup, shit taste ridiculous. 200K all blue, now I done scratched out my mirrors. Can't put no hoe on no jet, get you a one-way flight with spirit. Put shots the name on anything, ain't shit gon' happen, I secure it. 2 switches up on me, now do it look like I need security. Brr, 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 brr. Biggest. Brr, brr.
Let's see what you can do. Wow, amazing. Love, stunning. I'm obsessed.
Get Google Pixel 8 on us when you join Google Fi Wireless.
Say tell me.
2020. 2021.
Red and blue Lambo, same color the Zestos. Crayola paint, same color as my retros. Panoramic roof, same color as a Dobo. White diamond chain, same color as a Mayo. Bitch that favor J-Lo, diamond same color egg, yo. Solitary anklet got her walking like a leg bro. Pocket full of dead folks, licking like I still sell coat. Brown Gucci coat, cost your arm and your elbow. Exotic kush from Melrose, sticking to me like Velcro. Brown paper bag, crown with nothing but blue honchos. Wardrobe Willy Wonka, fountain.
Number 10, White Rock Lake Park, Dallas. In 1943, the story of the ghost of White Rock was published in a Texas folklore publication, Backwoods to Border. The story goes that there was a young couple who was looking for somewhere they could be alone. They drove down a deserted road and parked on the shore of the lake. When they turned their headlights on, they saw someone walking towards them. A woman dressed in a white sheer dress who was soaking wet was coming closer and closer to their car. Concerned, they asked the woman if she was alright, and the woman then spoke and said, "I'm sorry to intrude, and I would not under any other circumstances, but I must find a way home immediately. My boat overturned, the others are safe, but I must get home." The couple agreed to take her home, and she gave them an address not too far away. As they drove off, the driver turned back to ask for some directions, but the backseat was empty and soaking wet. When they arrived at the address the woman in white gave them, a man answered the door, and when he was told what happened, he replied, "You are the third couple who's come to me with this story. 3 weeks ago, while sailing on White Rock Lake, my daughter drowned. Many sightings have been reported since." Number 9. the Moody Mansion, Galveston. Before I get to the next entry, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing content. Before it was known as the Moody Mansion, it was the Willis Mansion. Built for Narcissa Willis in 1895, this 31-room mansion boasts a Romanesque architecture with ornate features like stained glass windows and hand-carved woodwork. She commissioned the house to be built against her late husband's wishes after he'd passed, spending the family inheritance in the process, something her 10 children did not appreciate. Unfortunately, she didn't get to live there long since she passed away in 1899, and it was then purchased by the Moodys. In 1900, a hurricane destroyed much of Galveston and took the lives of some 6,000 people, but strangely, the mansion stayed standing, untouched. Perhaps it was the ghost of Narcissa keeping her prized possession safe? Visitors to the house constantly report faces and spectral images showing up in photographs taken in the house, prompting paranormal investigators to come here to do research. Number 8. San Fernando Cathedral, San Antonio. The oldest church in the entire state of Texas has stood tall for nearly 300 years, and in that time it's collected many, many spirits, some of whom were buried within the walls of the church themselves. When searching for paranormal activity here, one of the first things researchers often see is a white horse trotting in front of the cathedral, only to disappear soon after. It's said that the horse was a gift from an Apache tribe that was refused and killed. Other ghosts that walk the grounds include that of a man dressed in black clothes from the 18th century who follows tours and then suddenly disappears, as well as those of monks who can be seen and heard standing at the back of the pews during services. Number 7. Demon's Road, Huntsville. Formerly known as Bowden Road, this seldom traveled dirt road is creepy enough without the ghost stories. It's overgrown, has misshapen trees, and in the dark seems like something right out of a horror movie. But there is at least one notable spirit who haunts travelers who dare come through here. A boy on a tricycle with glowing eyes has been reported by many people riding down the road. He appears in the middle of the road and stares you down until you approach him. And once you do, a thick fog rises from the ground and he disappears. There's one more story about Demon's Road that I found super interesting though. Two friends heard that the road was haunted and decided to check it out for themselves. And as they drove down it in the middle of the night, the trees seemed to shift and shake, and then they arrived at their destination at the end of Demon's Road, which just so happens to be the next entry on our list. Number 6. Martha Chapel Cemetery. When the two men drove up to the cemetery, which was named after the first person who was buried there, Martha Palmer, moonlight was piercing through the clouds and lighting the headstones and epitaphs before them. They both got out to crack a few brews and explore the cemetery, but when the driver decided to pour some on one of the graves, a skeletal hand burst from the ground, grabbing at his ankle and dragging him into the dirt. His friend and passenger ran over to help, kicking at the zombie-like arm and dragging him away.
Grand Marnier Louis Alexander. The grand encounter between VSOP Cognac and Orange Liqueur. Grand encounter, Grand Marnier.
After he was freed, the driver called out for them to escape, and when he got back to his car, he looked back, but didn't see his friend who supposedly just saved his life. He was actually still sitting in the passenger seat, asleep. And as he peeled out and drove back down Demon's Road, his passenger slumped over into his lap, and the driver realized that his friend had died. Allegedly, he passed away from a heart attack on the drive to the cemetery. And in 2018, a video surfaced from someone who was exploring the Google Street View of the area and saw a ghostly image appear inside the cemetery. A creepy, pale face of a boy was behind a tree in one shot and missing in the next. There was also a large black figure in the background that did not seem to be human. Spooky stuff. Number 5. Miss Molly's Hotel, Fort Worth. Originally built in 1910 as the Palace Rooms, Fort Worth's first bed and breakfast, Miss Molly's, has had quite the history. During Prohibition, it became a speakeasy called the Oasis. In the 1940s, it became a brothel known as the Guyette Hotel. And after that was shut down, it became Miss Molly's. There have been many, many reports of unwanted guests appearing here, most notably those of Jake the Cowboy and Josie King, the former madam of the brothel, both of whom are seen as full-body apparitions. Workers and visitors alike have witnessed them walking through locked doors, books being thrown, items disappearing and reappearing in random places, and strangely, change being neatly organized in certain rooms. In room 3, indents on the edge of the bed have appeared as though someone were suddenly sitting on it and shaking the bed while guests sleep. You know, I think Little Richard said it best. Good golly, Miss Molly. Number 4, The Grove, Jefferson. This house, built in 1861, has had many, many owners over the years, and most would agree that the place is cursed. Since its construction, most of the owners of the house have experienced some sort of tragedy. The original owner lost his cotton factory due to a freak flood, and a lynch mob committed horrible atrocities on the properties, where 4 freed slaves were brutalized and hung from trees on the property. The spirits of these men are said to be the most active spirits on the property. Later owners saw multiple family members take their own lives on the property, and some developed rare diseases. The spirits here are quite restless, and there are reports abound of books flying off shelves, mirrors shattering, voices telling people to do horrible things to themselves, and full-on ghostly apparitions that appear and disappear at will. All of these things show that the Grove definitely belongs on this list. Number 3, the Black Swan Inn, San Antonio. There is no relation to the 2010 film here, but the strange happenings have messed up people's minds just as much as Natalie Portman's characters was. The land that the inn now stands on has major ties to indigenous peoples from some 7,000 years ago, and is also a former battle site for the war between the Texan and Mexican army in 1842. But 35 years later, a dairy farm was founded on the land by a German immigrant. The blood-soaked soil here seems to be a bad place to build, as tragedy struck many who lived on the land. The farmer's wife passed away from cancer she developed shortly after moving in, and 2 years later, he decided to join her by taking his own life. Soon after, the property was purchased by 2 families and renamed the White Gables. However, at the age of 38, one of the new owners, Jolene Street, also passed away due to cancer, and like the owners before them, her husband hung himself in the bedroom. The inn that now stands has had reports of the spirits of the former owners wandering the halls with their necks broken, pushing guests off of their beds, and generally getting up to no good. No matter which way you slice it, this property seems cursed. Number 2, the Hill House, Mineral Springs. In part 2, I talked about the haunted Baker Hotel in Mineral Springs, but it seems that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because just behind the Baker Hotel lies one of the most haunted places in Texas, the Hill House. Many people stay in this house attempting to witness paranormal activity, and most of them get more than they bargained for, and don't make it through the night without leaving terrified. The owners of the house, who purchased it in 2017 knowing its haunted history, rent it out to individuals and paranormal research teams looking to witness something terrifying. And apparently about 50% of them, including the professionals, leave within the first night. This is due to a spirit or entity that resides here named Toby, who growls loudly in your ear to get out, knocks things over, slams doors, and even gets violent. Videos show all sorts of terrible things happening to people who stay here, like a woman who was taunting the spirits, trying to make something happen, being viciously pulled off of her bed, leaving her bruised. And when she returned a year later, for some reason, she was scratched by something invisible in the room so badly that blood leaked through her shirt. Whoever Toby is, it seems like he doesn't want anyone else to come into his house and will do anything to keep them out. Number 1, Old Town Spring. While the rest of the entries on this list and my other 2 videos have had some terrifying places, our number 1 spot belongs to an entire town that is haunted, and some even say cursed. Allegedly, in the 1700s, a curse was cast by members of the Akokisa tribe on the town and its people who stole their land and killed their kin. And this curse has followed the town all the way through history, continuing even today. Every building in this small town has a haunting story, and I'll share a few of them with you now, but I encourage you to look this up because there are so many more that I just can't get to today. The Whitehall House was built in 1895 and has since been converted into a funeral home, and they have a special room upstairs designated as the Ghost Room, where the spirits of the dead who haunt the building can reside. Figures are seen walking through the door, dancing on the balcony, and heard inside. One of the previous owners decided to renovate the room and experienced, quote, violent spirit activity, and it took years for the ghosts to calm back down. There are now 2 new clauses in the lease agreement for the building. The ghost room is not to be disturbed, and you can't break the lease due to a haunting. Many of the buildings in town can be seen with trees growing closely and even through some of the buildings, and allegedly the curse placed upon the town ensured that if anyone cut down any trees, they would experience a terrible fire. And this has happened inexplicably many times to many different buildings in the town, and some quite recent. There is also a hanging tree where a judge sentenced more than 60 people to death, which is an insane rate, even by the standards of any time. And the old ice house, which was used to store corpses waiting to be sent to the funeral home, has a heavy energy, and everything goes quiet when you get near it. And it's burned down countless times. You know, with all of these creepy things going on throughout the years, it is no wonder people think Old Town Spring is cursed, and a no-brainer that it ended up number 1 on this list. And it might even be above the number 1s in part 1 and 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Starting us off at number 10, the Hanging Jail. Actually called the Beauregard Parish Jail, it opened in 1915, and it was actually kind of a big deal because it had extraordinary amenities for a jail. Each cell had a window and a bathroom, and cells on the top floor even had a skylight. But despite its beautiful architecture, it was also the site of Louisiana's first double execution. In 1926, 2 men were committed after killing and robbing a taxi driver and sentenced to be hanged. They claimed innocence, but still the verdict passed and the 2 men died in the jail, giving it the infamous name. It remained open until 1981, and now a museum. It's believed to be haunted by the 2 men along with other inmates who felt they were unjustly put behind bars. Many have reported being pushed or hearing voices while visiting, and some have even captured photos of strange, inexplicable, shadowy figures lurking on the porch and window, leaving no other explanation than to assume the jail remains a haunted and terrifying place to visit. Coming in at number 9, Pleasant Hall. This story has 2 versions.
Like the taste of fresh apples? At Angry Orchard, we use real fruit from our 100-year-old orchard. And 2 apples in every bottle of Angry Orchard. So relax with the crisp Angry Orchard hard cider. Madly refreshing.
So I will let you decide which one you think is true. Once upon a time, while attending the Louisiana State University, a resident tragically took her life in the now infamous room 312. One story says the girl killed her boyfriend in a fit of rage and then, shocked at her actions, took her own life because she could not live with what she had done. The other story claims the girl jumped out of the window of her room and fell to her impending doom, terrifying the students on campus that witnessed the horrifying sight. But which one really happened? Well, it seems that is the hard part to find out. But what's not difficult to know is that the spirit of the girl remains, haunting Pleasant Hall to this day. Students have reported seeing her ghost roam the campus and hearing strange noises coming from the other side of room 312. And sometimes at night, when you least expect it, the door to room 312 will open and shut all on its own. Coming in at number 8, St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Regarded as the city of the dead, the St. Louis Cemetery number 1 holds more ghost stories than you'd want to encounter in a lifetime. In the span of a mere block, the cemetery has over 700 tombs and over 100,000 bodies are known to be buried at the site. Most famously, it is the burial site of Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, the most revered and feared practitioner in New Orleans history. Reports of her ghost have detailed her in her signature red and white turban and claim she will suddenly appear out of nowhere and then vanish from plain sight just as fast. Visitors have experienced scratching, pinching, shoving, suddenly becoming ill, and even hearing her haunting voice echo across the cemetery, sending many that have dared to visit running for the hills. So just be careful if you choose to stop by. If you aren't careful, she could curse you for life. Next up at number 7, the Calcasieu Courthouse. The history of capital punishment is a torrid one, and as it turns out, this courthouse is actually famous for just that. Back in the 1940s, there was a woman named Toni Jo McCuiston. She lived quite a tumultuous life involved in drugs and her local brothel, but one day she fell in love with a man who frequented her establishment named Claude Henry, and so they got married and she started to really turn her life around. But after Claude was sent to jail for 50 years for killing someone, something inside Toni snapped. She planned to bust Claude out of jail with a friend, but in the process of stealing a car, killed the owner and left him in a ditch. She was caught and sentenced to death and would become the first ever woman to be executed by the electric chair in Louisiana. It's said her spirit still haunts the courthouse, locking doors and messing around with the filing systems during the day. But steer clear at night. As residents report, you can smell her burning hair and hear her unruly screams echo through the streets. Coming in at number 6, P Farm. Nicknamed to the pea farm, it is not actually a farm, nor does it have anything to do with peas. It is, however, an old abandoned prison. The facility was in operation between 1905 to 1950, and rumor has it that life was incredibly rough and difficult at the pea farm for prisoners, even more so than your typical prison. Beatings and lashings were commonplace, and even killing of prisoners was nothing to bat an eye at. So it's no surprise that those whose life may have ended here have stuck around, maybe trying to seek revenge on those who hurt them. Today, the prison is strictly off limits to visitors, but those that walk past have reported hearing shrieks and other strange noises coming from inside the abandoned building. Maybe no one is allowed for a good reason. Next up at number 5, Bonnie and Clyde's ambush site. Maybe you've heard of the infamous couple, but just in case you haven't, let me catch you up. They were notorious bank robbers across Louisiana and Texas during the Great Depression in America and made quite a name for themselves. In recent years, it has been suggested their exploits were exaggerated, but one thing that wasn't is how they died. The day was May 23rd, 1934, and police from both Louisiana and Texas managed to corner them in their stolen car. Authorities fired more than 100 bullets at the couple, and as the story goes, you could hear Bonnie's scream from the next town over. Residents claim that if you visit the site of their death, the ghosts of the couple will make themselves well known to you. Apparitions have shown in photographs, and some have even heard what they believe to be Bonnie's scream as she took her last few breaths on this earth. Coming in at number 4, Oak Alley. Once upon a time, it was one of the largest plantations in Louisiana, and just like every other of its kind, it has a dark past. Since its dark days, it has turned into a bed and breakfast and historical site, but the people that were tortured remain, haunting the ground and terrorizing visitors. Numerous accounts have claimed to hear unexplained sounds like blood-curdling screams in the middle of the night, or the sound of a horse-drawn carriage clopping along the path. Some visitors have even experienced being touched or grabbed by an unseen entity, and one investigator got so scared he dropped his camera while trying to capture a spirit. Paranormal investigators have managed to capture several EVPs that indicate unhappy ghosts lingering the property, and though no one has been hurt staying here yet, tread carefully as you never know just when you could set the spirits off. Coming in at number 3, Alice's grave. Alice died in the 19th century, and although she had a fairly normal life while alive, her death and afterlife were anything but expected. She was laid to rest in an above-ground grave, but soon after, many of the townspeople began to question, was the grave haunted, or worse, was Alice a witch? As the legend goes, in the middle of the night, the large slab of marble covering her grave was removed on 3 separate occasions, and each time, her remains were left outside the grave. No one stepped forward admitting to have moved Alice or the slab, which led people to believe that Alice was a witch trying to escape her grave and haunt the town. Eventually, large iron bars were placed over the grave in an attempt to hold her spirit inside. But this hasn't seemed to stop her, as locals claim you can still see her wandering the cemetery at night. But just exactly what is she looking for? That is one of the many unanswered questions that leave visitors terrified, unsure if she comes in peace or if she is out for revenge. Next up at number 2, the Manchac Swamp. While many are familiar with the legendary voodoo priestess Marie Laveau, she was not the only one of her time. Julia Brown was a well-respected healer and midwife who resided in a small village called Frenier. At first, she loved caring for her village, but after some time, she started to feel disrespected by her community, feeling as though they were taking her gifts for granted. Julia began scaring the village, telling them dooming predictions about their impending deaths, and the townspeople, unsure if she was placing a curse or foretelling their future, became very troubled. Shortly before her own death, she said, "One day I'm gonna die and I'm gonna take all you with me." And just days after she was buried, 3 entire villages were destroyed by a hurricane and hundreds of lives were lost. To this day, many believe the spirit of Julia Brown haunts the swamp, and visitors have reported hearing blood-curdling screams and the sound of her voice singing cryptic and frightening songs, terrifying all those that dare walk by. And last up in our number 1 spot, La Laurie Mansion. Arguably one of the most infamous buildings in all of Louisiana, La Laurie Mansion was once home to the cruel and torturous Madame Delphine La Laurie. Even in her time, she was regarded as a monster and was known to have her slaves taken from her on more than one occasion.
It's the top 10 most amazing.
Outrageous mistreatment. In 1834, a fire broke out in her mansion.
In Grand Rising.
Police and fire marshals arrived at the site. They found one of her slaves chained to the stove, claiming to have started the fire to try and take her own life to escape the cruelty. Another 7 victims were found in her attic, suspended from the ceiling, mutilated and barely alive, stating to have been imprisoned for months. Once news broke out of her cruelties, citizens attacked the house and demolished everything they could. While the original building no longer stands, the grounds it stood on are some of the most haunted in all of Louisiana, as it's believed nearly 100 people lost their lives under Madame Delphine's cruel supervision. Visitors have reported feeling the violent touches of ghostly hands, and a medium that visited stated that there is a very dark demonic entity that resides within the building's walls. So just tread carefully. Should you choose to visit, the spirits that live there are not too thrilled by visitors in their home.
Kicking off our list at number 10. Room 206. This gives me Stephen King 1408 vibes, and I'm not sure that you're ready. Next time you visit Florida, make sure you read every customer review before you check into a hotel, because some of them might be full of ghosts. That might be a thing that you just might have to deal with. Room 206 at the Super on International Drive. Apparently, it's super haunted. Guests have reported the bed shaking in the middle of the night, probably terrible for your sleep, or freezing cold air even though the AC is turned off. And worst of all, guests have seen their bed look as though somebody was sleeping there moments before, even though it was perfectly made right before they checked in. Can ghosts squat? Is that legal? We've got a couple of spirit squatters in our room. Gotta move. Number 9, Disney on Ice. Many families love to visit Orlando this time of year. The theme parks there are spectacular, especially Disney World. I went once when I was younger, but I don't recall ever seeing a real life Walt Disney. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that he died in 1966. Who knows? But never say never. One of Orlando's oldest tales is that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically frozen after his death. And right now, apparently it's being stored in a bunker underneath the theme park. I mean, that's a bit more creative than being cremated. I'll give him that. It's pretty Walt Disney of him just to freeze himself forever. A grad from the University of Central Florida Film School, Benjamin Lancaster, they actually made a film about this whole idea. It's called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. That's a family classic, some would say. Number 8, Scarlett O'Hara's. You're gonna need 2 pieces of ID for this next one, all right? Perhaps the most haunted bar in Florida, located in St. Augustine, Scarlett O'Hara's is haunted by a past owner. Many believe that spirit likes to make itself known to guests. That's always fun. Try and go grab a pint and now you got a ghoul in front of you. That spirit is one of George Coley. Now George sadly bit the bullet one night when he was in his bathtub, so now we have a series of unexplainable events. Plates and glasses will sometimes move across the bar on their own, and the jukebox keeps playing Help Me Rhonda even when it's unplugged. So that's absolutely terrifying. If you want to check it out now, be warned, because it's a full-on tourist attraction at this point. But if you go, you can pose alongside the same bathtub that George Coley died in. Yeah, how lovely is that? Are we going to Disney World? Nah, even better. Scarlett O'Hara's. Yeah, you're gonna love it. Number 7, Stranahan House. You don't want to be stranded at the Stranahan House. It's gonna be bad news. Fort Lauderdale has a few haunted hidden gems, and the oldest house just happens to be the most haunted. What do you know? What odds are that? What odds are that? What are those odds? There we go. The house's OG owner was Frank Stranahan, and today, if you visit ye old stomping grounds, well, you might catch Frank in a photo or 2. It's said that Frank still oversees the place, and he regularly shows up in guests' photos. So this ghost likes to photobomb. That's pretty amazing. I kind of like that. I suppose being trapped in the same house for all of eternity probably gets a little boring from time to time. Just to pop into a photo, throw some peace signs up, and then disappear back into the walls. Ivy Stranahan, Frank's late wife, she also has made an appearance or 2. Nice. True love is haunting the same house forever. Guests have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and her perfume still lingers in the hallway. Must have been some good, strong stuff. Nice. Now, it's not all fun and games. Augustus Stranahan, aka Frank's father, well, his ghost likes to throw books. It's really aggressive, so heads up for that, I guess, if you go. Cheers. Number 6, the Plaza Resort and Spa. Ah, yes, kick back and relax with ghosts. It's just what you want. You're never alone, I guess. That's a plus side. The Plaza Resort and Spa sounds like a relaxing getaway until you start looking up footage of the actual resort. One's gonna get your attention for sure. Back in August 2013, security cameras captured late-night footage of this shape-shifting ghost, some sort of spirit, some scary blob. It's bad news, really, in any regard. What happened was the original building was destroyed by fire in 1909, and current staff will testify that they've seen the ghosts of victims caught in that blaze. How they know? I have no idea, but apparently they do know. It's a lot of details for one ghost appearance. One of the most common sightings includes a woman whose spirit is known to mess with the elevators and make items in the kitchen disappear. Okay, really? That last one's for sure an employee stealing food. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know. I think a ghost ate that cheesecake, boss. I don't know, spooky stuff, spooky. Number 5, the Blue Anchor Pub. Another bar, another haunted bill to pay. Here we go, debit or credit. Heading over to Delray Beach, the Blue Anchor Pub was built in 1840s in London, but the wooden interior was sent to New York City and then later on sent to Florida in 1996. So yeah, these spirits must be confused. They go from Jack the Ripper to some dude wearing a Yankees hat talking to a TV. Trapped in the wooden interior is the ghost of one Bertha Starkey, who was sadly killed by her husband back in the 1840s. Now, you know Bertha is lurking about when you hear rattling pots in the kitchen, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, you'll hear wailing in the middle of the night. Nice. Again, horrible sleep at this place. The Blue Anchor sounds like a really relaxing time, but every night at 10 o'clock, the current owners will blast the ship horn to scare away her spirit. I don't know, I feel like blaring a ship horn at 10 p.m. is more jarring than some pots and pans moving sometimes. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear the pots and pans than in the middle of the night. No way. Number 4, the Biltmore Hotel. Another hotel to avoid at all costs. Awesome, we love these ones. First of all, do you actually like staying at a hotel? Some people love it. Some people find it super relaxing. I can't help but think about what went on in the bed before me. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why does this part of the bed feel a little bit caved in? What's going on here? Every time I'm in a hotel, I have the worst dreams and I can't sleep at all. The Biltmore Hotel in the city of Coral Gables is also one of the most haunted hotels in Florida. You've probably heard of this at some point. It all started in 1926 during initial construction. The Biltmore witnessed a foul killing on the 13th floor. The 13th floor of all floors, my God. The Biltmore was also turned into a military hotel during World War II before ultimately being closed and then abandoned later in 1968. Now, the city renovated the hotel later on in the 80s, but it didn't take long for ghost stories to start to spread. It's horrible, horrible past, I mean, more than fair. Now, of course, the most activity is on the 13th floor, so if you do check this one out, really double down. Go to the haunted floor, you know? Don't just look outside.
Come on, Arthur. This is our time.
And then book. Go in, stay a night. I can't believe some buildings don't have a 13th floor. Can you imagine that? Well, they do, but everyone pretends that they don't. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, it's 12. I don't know. We'll see. Are you a 13th floor believer? Comment down below. Me personally, I don't think so. Because it's the 14th or the 12th. Or the 13th, I don't know anymore. No one knows anymore. It goes 11, 12, 14. You're like, really? What's the 14s? We know what's going on here, come on. Number 3, Tampa Theater. If you're a fellow theater kid, you're also gonna love this one. Here we go. Tampa Theater opened up in 1926. The theater is now said, of course, to be haunted by a woman that was struck and killed by a carriage on the property. Imagine being hit by a carriage. It's so slow. This was actually before the theater was built, so her spirit has been there for a while. If you go to Tampa Theater today, you might catch a glimpse of that woman in a white gown walking across the mezzanine hallway. This time, without carriages whipping through, hopefully, sans carriage. Imagine telling somebody in front of you to sit down during a show, and they just disappear. You're like, I think that was a ghost. I think that was probably a ghost. It says in the playbill, ghost, so maybe that was her. Tampa Theater, of course, has leaned into these claims. Now they offer Ghosts of Tampa Theater Tour, where guests can learn about its haunted history. I'd love to do this tour. I don't know. Maybe I'll go to Florida. Who knows? I won't. I'm like, I'm probably not going to. Number 2, Key West Cemetery. A cemetery that's haunted Get out of town. You don't say. The beachside cemetery was built in 1847. Now, it was built specifically for victims of a hurricane that occurred a year prior in 1846. That's terrible. Now, this cemetery is the final resting place for roughly 80,000 to 100,000 people. So yeah, I can only assume there's a ghost or two hanging out. That's extremely tragic. Walking through a graveyard at night is scary enough anytime, but Key West Cemetery is so specific that the entire time you're walking through, you feel connected in a way. Now, me personally, I'm all set. I don't want to feel connected to an 1846 tragedy. I'm all set. I'll go the long way around the cemetery, then I'll meet you on the other side, if anything. But if you're into this kind of thing, they also offer ghost tours, so knock yourself out. There you go. Apparently, it's too scary for children, so that's a plus. Lines will be a little shorter than usual. And finally, number 1, St. Augustine Lighthouse. A scary lighthouse. How is that possible? The St. Augustine Lighthouse is located, of course, in Florida and was built between 1871 and 1874. And it's considered Florida's first official lighthouse ever. Imagine that. Boom, let there be light. Hey, I made you a lighthouse. Enjoy, we're all good now. There have been several tragic events over the following years, seeing as it's the first lighthouse ever. Seen a lot of history. But even during initial construction, there were several freak accidents on site. Today, said spirits are still lurking about. Sightings of shadowy figures are common, but just one time, somebody saw a hand coming through the tower door. Yeah, a floaty hand, like from Idle Hands. How terrifying is that? Can you imagine just a Smash Bros hand just lurking near you? Several guests have reported furniture also moving around on its own, which is definitely a hazard. And one person even said that they had some of their arm hairs plucked off of them while they were in the basement. Probably that floaty weird hand, just doink, give me one of those. Another guest felt someone grab their ankle at one point while walking down a hallway, which actually caused them to trip and fall down. So something's going on. I don't know what this ghost hand wants, but it's pretty chaotic to me, it seems. I think the ghost hand wants you to click like if you like this video. I think that's what it wants, really.
Starting us off at number 10 is Louisiana Old State Capitol. This neo-Gothic cathedral-like castle was built back in 1846 after the Louisiana legislature decided to relocate the capital away from the sinful lifestyle scattered across New Orleans. For many years, it housed some of the most esteemed and prestigious lobbyists and lawmakers, and although it's no longer used for politics, it is far from empty. Said to be haunted by numerous entities like a security guard and a girl who lived nearby during construction, the most notorious is that of Pierre Couvion. Once a senator in the Capitol's prime, it said Pierre dropped dead from a heart attack in the building after a spirited speech about the corruption of politics. Visitors say his ghost still haunts the halls to this day, and he can often be heard stomping around the Senate floor or playing tricks on the staff. Once while making his nightly rounds, a security guard, an alive one to be clear, not the ghost, said he felt a tap of a cold finger on his shoulder, but when he turned around, nothing was there, but he knew he wasn't imagining it, as afterwards it sounded like something or someone was giggling. Most creepy of all is the numerous reports of staff saying they've seen motion detectors go off only to find an empty room upon inspection. So they would go back and check security tapes, but nothing had entered or left at the time the sensors were triggered. Coincidence? You tell me. Coming in at number 9, the Woodland Plantation. Owned by notorious pirate and seafarer William Johnson, during its active years it was used as a sugar plantation, housing and torturing a multitude of slaves. It likely comes as no surprise that Johnson was not revered as a kind man. Not only did he frequently kill for his job at sea, but he was notoriously cruel to his slaves too, with many reporting he would not bat an eye, executing or beating any who dared question his power or step out of line. Today, those brave enough to visit report hearing the cries of the tortured souls echo through the house, as well as lights turning on and off independently, and unexplainable bursts of cold air even in the blistering heat of summer. Most terrifying, though, is those that have witnessed the ghost of Pierre Lafleur, a man who briefly lived at the house after its days as a plantation, who after running out of money, took to the chandelier in the living room and tragically ended his life. I will not be taking my chances with that one. Next up at number 8 is the USS Kidd. Maybe I just watched too much Pirates of the Caribbean as a kid, but there is something extra scary about a haunted ship. During World War II, this boat was a destroyer ship for the US Navy named after Admiral Isaac Kidd. Kidd tragically lost his life to the attack on Pearl Harbor, but surprisingly, this isn't where the boat gets its ghost story from. On April 11th, 1945, a Japanese plane committed a attack, plummeting into the boat, killing 38 sailors and leaving 55 others badly wounded. Today, it's no longer used as a warship, but remains docked in the Baton Rouge as a war memorial, and all that enter say they've felt spirits of the sailors who lost their lives inside. Visitors claim to see full-bodied apparitions of the spirits decked out in their war uniforms, as well as ghostly arms and legs creepily floating around, looking as if they were brutally ripped from the rest of the body. But whatever you do, just stay away from the sleeping quarters, as that's where things get even worse. Those that have ventured down say the blood-curdling screams of the soldiers can be heard bouncing off the walls, and some even say they've been pushed or grabbed by the tortured souls right up until they step foot off the ship. Coming in at number 7 is Chrétien Point. First run by Hippolyte Chrétien, a French colonist, Chrétien accrued a massive wealth operating his cotton plantation off the backs of slaves. On top of that, Chrétien also had some less than friendly friends, one of which was the famed pirate Jean Lafitte. One day, Chrétien's son, Hippolyte II, fell in love with the neighbor girl Felicity Nada. She was a fiery, passionate, and independent Spanish woman, and despite pushback from his father, Hippolyte married Felicity and the pair remained happily together. Once his father died, Hippolyte took over the family business, but sadly he died of yellow fever shortly after in 1839, leaving Felicity to keep things running. She took pride in this position and accrued even more
That's the way it is. Come on. That's just the way it is.
more wealth than her father-in-law or husband ever had, eventually even becoming friends with the pirate Jean Lafitte herself, just as her father-in-law had. But after Lafitte's death, his crew thought they could pull the wool over Felicity's eyes and steal from her beloved home. But they were no match for the widow. Upon the break-in, she shot a pistol right between the eyebrows of one of the pirates, sending the rest running for their lives. Eventually, Felicity died, but eternally devoted to her plantation, her spirit has never left. Visitors say you can still hear the deadly gunshot clear as day in the hall, as well as the sound of bodies tumbling down the stairs. Just be careful if you do decide to visit. Felicity does not always take kindly to visitors. Next up at number 6 is Labo Mansion. Once the plantation of a wealthy businessman in 1846, in 1905 the property was sold and converted into a hotel and casino. Now at the time, gambling was outlawed in New Orleans, but it became quite the popular hang spot during Prohibition. While patrons were likely pulled in by the promise of booze and gambling, it didn't take long before they realized the building was haunted by dozens of spirits. Partygoers often complained their watches immediately stopped working the minute they stepped foot on the property, only to magically be good as new once they left. Many claimed to hear strange noises echo through the halls, and others nearly fainted seeing the woman in white who sat on the upstairs porch. Then in 2013, a group of so-called paranormal investigators that by the sound of it were more like a group of drunken idiots, snuck onto the property looking to catch one of the many rumored entities said to haunt the historic halls. But having no real clue what they were doing, decided to light fire on the building in an attempt to provoke the spirits to show themselves. Sadly, all they did was burn it down. However, the fire was no match for the spirits. Even without the walls to hold them in, all the entities remain haunting the property. Those that walk by say their watches still stop working the minute they step foot on the property, and sometimes at night you can hear the cries of the terrifying woman in white. Next up at number 5 is Lloyd Hall Plantation. After leaving his London family for a new life in America, William Lloyd built his plantation in 1820. It's rumored that Lloyd was actually exiled from his family's insurance dynasty, hence his sudden move to America, but no one actually knows for sure. Like all plantations of the time, it was a cruel and brutal place for the slaves, but the owner was swimming in money and profit. That was, however, until the Civil War, when it was discovered that Lloyd was working as a double spy for both the Union and Confederacy. Once word got out, Union soldiers stormed his house and tarred and feathered him before he was hanged for his disloyalty. It's said Lloyd now haunts the house along with the many slaves that died while under his care. But that's not all. Others reported a Union soldier named Harry who was shot while hiding in the attic, as well as Lloyd's niece who, after being left at the altar, jumped out the second-story window to her death. Those brave enough to step on the property claimed to hear piano and violins despite no one playing, ringing doorbells when no one is outside, and see furniture moving around all on its own. Some say that if you listen carefully, you can still hear the screams of William Lloyd echo across the property. Coming in at number 4, Huma's house. By this point, I am sure you have put together that there were a lot of plantations in Louisiana during the early 1800s. Among that list is Huma's house. Said to be haunted by countless spirits of tortured souls from its time as a plantation, the ghosts that live here are sure to send you running for the hills. Among them are 16 souls said to be trapped inside oak trees across the property. All the souls trapped inside lost their lives during a dangerous construction project gone wrong. The trees were a cherished entity to the house, but workers cut down many of the historic oak trees before sending them down the river to be milled. There were 16 profiteers set off aboard the backs of the big tree trunks, but somehow their bodies never recovered. It's said they remained trapped inside the trees as punishment, stuck on the property they tried to cheat. Among the haunted trees is a mysterious girl in a blue dress, often seen staring at visitors while she remains perched at the top of a staircase, but in the blink of an eye she'll disappear into thin air. And if a creepy girl apparition and Harry Potter trees don't scare you, then just wait until you feel the hand of a cold spirit grab your shoulder. You will never want to return as long as you live. Coming in at number 3, Taylortown Tower. Once a booming church amongst the community, shortly after its opening in 1906, membership began declining at a rapid rate, and soon the church became abandoned and used for hay storage for the nearby farmers. But how did it go from a church into a bell tower? Well, as the legend goes, a local plantation owner's daughter was engaged to be married, but on the day of her wedding, the groom couldn't go through with it and disappeared without a trace. The bride was absolutely devastated, and in a fit of depression ran to the nearby abandoned tower to end her suffering. It's said the bride jumped from the top of the tower to her death, and her father was so distraught when he happened upon her body that he burned the church down. In a cruel twist of fate, all that survived the flames was the very tower she had jumped from, taunting him until his dying day. Locals say that when there is a full moon, the bride can be seen wandering the land looking for her loved one, screaming and crying out after him. Next up at number 2 is the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. Back in the day, the Bourbon was a highly frequented theater and ballroom where wealthy Creole men could sneak away from their wives to secretly engage in erotic nighttime affairs. But all the fun came to a screeching halt in 1816 when a fire took out most of the building. Fast forward to 1881, and the building was put up for sale and purchased by a community of nuns. But after a brutal yellow fever epidemic struck Louisiana, many nuns and orphans' lives were lost, and that is where the ghost stories begin. Today, the building operates as one of New Orleans' most luxurious hotels, but make no mistake, it is haunted by at least 20 different terrifying spirits. Guests have reported the sounds of laughter in the halls when no one was around, and some swear to have seen young people lying in beds with mists of black fog hanging over them. But most terrifying is the ghost who resides in room 644. Rumor has it that during its time as a monastery, a nun took her own life in this very room. Those that have stayed reported hearing blood-curdling screams from the room at all hours of the day, and any guests brave enough to sleep the night were awoken by the nun staring at them over the bed. So if you're looking to be haunted by a creepy nun on your vacation, be my guest, but I'll be looking for different accommodation. And last up today in our number 1 spot is La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits, and some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late-night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's four walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen
Welcome to today's side quest, the store run against the clock. Just another day in the life of a Mike. Lemonade that hits harder for Mikes that go harder. The world needs more Mikes.
dressed in beautiful clothing, roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly, and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor, reported to have died on the steps of the hotel. But the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black, sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair, and said, quote, "You belong to me. I'll never let you go." Starting us off at number 10, the Old Red Field Road. Said to be extremely active with spirits, keep your eyes peeled if you ever find yourself driving down this road. Those that try find that their flashlights and radios suddenly stop working, and some even say their cars begin acting up as soon as they start to approach. One driver in fact said that the hood of their car flew open on sight, and when they went to go and check it out, there was no explanation for why it would have done that. Visitors claim that countless ghosts roam the road, walking up and down, likely coming from the nearby cemetery, and that they feel a sense of deep, unsettling anxiety until they turn off the Old Red Field Road. So maybe if you do visit, just find an alternate route. Next up at number 9, Cotter Bridge. Located in a small town of less than 900 people, during the day the bridge is a world-renowned hotspot for trout fishing, visited by residents and tourists alike. But things take a turn after the sun goes down, and locals say that this bridge is haunted by some truly terrifying spirits. Residents say that at night you can hear the cries of an infant coming from the bridge and the sounds of young people playing for hours and hours. But most haunting of all is the woman who can be seen sprinting from vicious hounds. No one knows who she is or why she's being chased, but the fear of her screaming voice has scared residents from ever daring to get too close. Coming in at number 8, Fort Smith Courthouse. During the late 19th century, Fort Smith was the site of many sentenced to be hanged. In fact, it was rather notorious for it, as the presiding judge at the time, named Isaac C. Parker, got the nickname the Hanging Judge from sentencing a whopping 160 people to their death, 79 of which received the punishment. The hangings happened outside the courthouse in the gallows, perhaps as a warning sign for all to see what happened to criminals. And it's believed the condemned men of the jail still roam the grounds seeking revenge on Isaac Parker. Many today say they've had frightening experiences while at the courthouse, especially in the gallows. Visitors claim to have heard gavels banging, seen ropes swinging when there was no wind, and one groundskeeper even claims to have spoken with the ghost of Isaac Parker himself. Next up at number 7, the Clayton House. Originally built in the 1800s as a Civil War hospital, it wasn't until 1882 when William Clayton moved his family into the now historical home. The family seemed to have a fairly happy life in their home, but I guess with roots as a hospital, ghosts flock to it and continue to haunt it to this day. The former director of the site, Martha, says that as soon as she started working there, she knew something was off. Doors would slam in the middle of of the night. She would hear footsteps from down the hall when no one was there, and one room on the second floor would always sound like music was playing from inside. Then, in 2008, a carpenter who was doing some repairs on the building took pictures to keep track of the progress, but when those photos got developed, he saw a woman dressed in brown lurking in the back of one of his photos. And he wasn't the only one to claim to have seen her lurking in the corners. After a while, Clayton's house had kind of a reputation, and so paranormal investigators started visiting. And using EVPs, they got recordings of a man shouting obscenities at someone named Anna, which piqued their interest as one of Clayton's daughters was named Anne. But maybe most terrifying was one woman who says that she was standing by herself in the hotel when her hair was tugged hard. She turned around to see who had snuck up on her, assuming it was a prank, but no one was around and she was all alone. Next up at number 6, the Toltec Mounds. A hiking trail might not be the first place you'd expect to be terrifyingly haunted, but it makes much more sense once you know that it leads through the remains of an ancient civilization. More officially referred to as the Plum Bayou Mounds, there were once home to a large group of people beginning around 600 AD. But what no one has been able to figure out since is their sudden and mysterious disappearance in 1050 AD. It's thought that the mounds were used for a variety of different purposes, but we know for sure that at least one was a burial ground, and as you can imagine, that is where most of the ghost sightings have occurred. Visitors who pass through the trail say they've seen strange apparitions of what looked like ancient people, along with mysterious orbs of light popping out of nowhere, and some say that if you walk by at night, you'll hear footsteps of the ancient civilization that will send you running as far away as you can. Coming in at number 5, the Basin Park Hotel. This hotel has long been the site of many paranormal sightings, although no one knows exactly why so many ghosts conjugate in this building. One belief is because the hotel possesses magical abilities due to the famous spring waters that it's built beside. During the 1800s, the indigenous people of the area talked about their holy springs, and it led many to believe that Eureka Springs had healing powers that could cure ailments and crippling conditions. Maybe these holy waters are what make the spirits more visible to the human eye today. Most famously, in room 307 lies the ghost of a cowboy who's been known to taunt the guests who stay there, waking them up in the middle of the night. Other entities that visitors claim to have witnessed are the young, translucent woman with steel blue eyes and cotton candy blonde hair, as well as a girl who runs around in pigtails and a yellow dress. Those that stay say they often see various orbs of light appearing around the grounds as if out of nowhere, and that objects will move all on their own very frequently. So if I were you, I'd just find a different hotel to stay at on your visit. Coming in at number 4, the King Opera House. While it's safe to assume you'd expect some kind of drama at the opera, usually it's left to the actors on stage. Said to be haunted by the ghost of a young actor named Charles Tolson, many believe they've seen the famous man roam the halls where he had his last performance ever. As the story goes, Tolson was a talented young man and owner of a traveling actors company that happened to be performing at the King Opera House for a week at the end of September in 1903. Tolson caught the eye of a young woman named Allie Parchman, who was just 17 but bored to death by her town and looking for adventure. But Allie's father got word that she intended to leave town with the young man and elope, and this made him furious. Her father ran down to the opera house to confront Tolson and kill him. When he arrived, he shot him 3 times, and although Tolson didn't die then, his life was over by the next day while in the hospital. Visitors of the opera house say they feel a strange sensation when they enter, like they're being watched constantly, and some even claim to have witnessed him lurking the halls in his Victorian cape and top hat. Next up at number 3, the Crescent Hotel and Spa. Not only is this Victorian beauty believed to be one of the most haunted places in Arkansas, but some have even said it might be one of the most haunted places in all of America. Before its time as a haunted hotel, it was a hospital run by a crooked doctor who fooled his cancer patients into thinking that there was a cure. So as you can imagine, it's riddled with spirits with a vengeance. Over the years, countless guests and staff have come forward telling their tales, claiming to have heard strange sensations, slamming doors, abrupt waking in the middle of the night, and even seeing full-bodied apparitions while staying in room 218. It is believed that the room is haunted by the ghost of Michael, who was a builder for the hotel that fell off the roof to his death back in 1885 and landed right in front of where room 218 sits. Others claim they've seen a middle-aged man with a white mustache sitting at the bar who vanishes out of sight. And in 1987, a guest said they saw a nurse pushing a gurney down the hallway in the middle of the night. But maybe most terrifying of all is room 202, where allegedly someone managed to photograph a ghost and prove its existence. Coming in at number 2, the Peel Mansion. Back in 1875, this mansion was built by a man named Samuel Peel. He was a U.S. congressman and he lived in the home with his daughter Minnie. Both Peel and Minnie are said to haunt the house today, roaming the halls dressed in white, and often Minnie will play the piano if no one is in the room. But despite being the people the mansion is named after, they might not be the creepiest ghosts to haunt its halls. After the Peel family sold the mansion, a couple named Mr. and Mrs. English moved in with their family. One of their daughters, Marjorie, however, became very ill, and after discovering that she'd suffered from a burst appendix, a surgeon informed the family that she was not going to make it. After 10 days, Marjorie died and they covered her body in a sheet. But creepily, only a few hours after being pronounced dead, someone saw the sheet move. Marjorie was alive and went on to live for many more healthy years. But this troubled some of the staff on the farm, who believed that her spirit hadn't gotten back into her body and was somehow trapped under that sheet that others had seen moving. Years went by and Marjorie went back to her childhood home only to find that the room where people thought she had died was closed off. When she asked why, she was told it was haunted by a little girl. But the question was, is it Minnie or somehow the lost spirit from Marjorie's almost death? And last up in our number 1 spot, Highway 365. The legend began back in 1973 when a man picked up a girl on a bridge in the night. She was covered in bruises and cuts and looked very scared. She told the man that she had been in a car accident and asked if he could drive her home. The man complied, and when they got to the house she said was hers, she suddenly vanished from his car. Too stunned to realize what he'd just witnessed, the man went up to the door of the house anyway. The door was answered by the girl's father, who said that she had just died on that very bridge last month. But he wasn't the only one to see the girl in white, as she became known. The next year, a different man picked up a young woman on a bridge and drove her home. When they arrived, she asked if he could knock on the door since the house was dark. But when the door opened, the girl was gone, and the mother explained that her daughter had died 1 year earlier that same night. Finally, another year went by, and another man picked up the same girl dressed in white near a bridge in the rain. He offered her his coat to keep her warm, and when they got to her house, she vanished along with his coat. After talking with the dead girl's parent, who said she visits every year on the anniversary of her death, he went to visit the girl's headstone only to find his missing coat draped across it.
Number 10. White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake is an area that is filled with many legends. It's home to the ghost of the Lady of the Lake. Years ago, a young couple was driving home from a party along the lake late one night. The two were tired and ready to go home when the wife suddenly screamed at her husband to stop the car. A young woman in a long white gown had appeared in the road before them. The couple asked the woman if she needed a ride, and she accepted. They drove on, and all while the wife could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water. But once they reached the address the woman had give them, they turned around to find her gone, leaving behind only a puddle. Confused, the couple got out at the address and knocked on the door. An elderly man answered. They told the man about the young woman they had just picked up, and he sighed and told them they were not the first couple to come knocking on his door late at night. The woman they had picked up was his daughter, who had drowned in White Rock Lake 10 years earlier. The lady of the lake has been spotted and even picked up many times since, and continues to haunt White Rock Lake in her white gown, looking for a way back home, and this is just sad. Number 9. Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel was built on the former site of Dallas's original city hall in 1912, and the hotel has a reputation as one of the city's most prominent historical landmarks. In addition to being the oldest hotel in the city, it's no surprise it's also among the most haunted. One of the most famous spirits here is an apparition who appears in a 1930s era white wedding gown, the spirit of a jilted bride who was supposed to have been married in one of the hotel's glamorous ballrooms on the 19th floor, but ended up taking her own life at the hotel instead when her groom left her at the altar. Ever since that night, guests staying on the 19th floor report hearing a woman crying, footsteps running up and down the hall, and even the sound of rope creaking under the strain of a body. The bride spirit has been spotted wandering the halls after events and parties, still wearing her white dress and veil. Again, this is just incredibly sad. Staff and guests of the hotel also report an eerie feeling of being watched or of a presence in the room with them. Now, not all ghost residents have sad backstories, as many are believed to be former guests who checked in again during the afterlife because they had such a good time in the hotel back in their days among the living. Guess it's a cool place to be in life and death. Number 8. The Coombs Creek Trail. Located in Oak Cliff, this trail offers a serene, scenic path along Coombs Creek for nature lovers to enjoy, but everything is not as it seems, as this trail has an eerie history. Years ago, a young girl named Mary would ride her bike every day along the trail, but one day, Mary never returned home. It's still unknown whether Mary drowned in the creek, was struck by a passing train, or was taken, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Hikers still report seeing the figure of a young girl riding her bike dangerously close to the edge of the water, but when they call out to warn her, she vanishes into thin air. Others have reported seeing a small ghostly face of a young girl peeking at them from behind a tree. When they try to move closer to investigate, the face disappears. Then the face reappears further along the trail, inviting the hiker to follow her deeper and deeper into the woods. And if a ghost child is trying to get me
Like the taste of fresh apples? At Angry Orchard, we use real fruit from our 100-year-old orchard.
to go deeper in the woods, I'm just gonna turn around and leave. Number 7. The Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater is located on Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Elm Street? No, I've seen that movie before. Now, in the 1910s, it housed live vaudevillian performances before transitioning to screening films in 1922. The Majestic remained in business until the 1970s, and then its doors were reopened for live performances in 1983 after it landed on the National Register of Historic Places. Some say the theater's original owner, Carl Hopitzel, still haunts the building, making sure things run according to his liking. One former employee claims he shared an office space with Carl during his time there. He reports that one of his responsibilities each night was to ensure that the door in his office leading to the theater was locked, but each morning when he showed up for work, the door was wide open, and a strange chill would permeate from the room. When he mentioned this to his manager, he laughed and explained that this was only Carl, who liked to use the door to get into the theater and check up on things. Weird smells, stage props inexplicably moving, and a light hanging above the balcony illuminating on its own have all been attributed to Carl. His spirit is rumored to linger there to this day, making sure his theater runs smoothly and maybe catching a show or two. Number 6. Snuffers Restaurant on Greenville Avenue. Snuffers is a popular local chain that serves classic American food, or at least that's what it says when I Google it. But the location on Greenville Avenue serves up a lot more than just burgers. Customers and staff of the Dallas restaurant claim that the place is seriously haunted. Before Snuffers snuffers, there was an easy parlor. It seems that a man was badly injured after hours when a fight broke out at an employee party. He then stumbled into the bathroom where he drew his final breaths. Years later, once Easy Parlor became snuffers, the managers would sit at a table by the bathrooms each night to finish up closing paperwork. As they sat in the dark, near empty restaurant, they would listen as antagonized, stumbling footsteps made their way to the bathroom, then watch as the door creaked open by itself and never shut. In 2013, the original building was demolished and reconstructed, but reports of strange happenings didn't stop. Other employees have since reported feeling cold gusts of wind rush by them and doors slamming shut all on their own. Sounds like a dinner and a show to me. Number 5. Flagpole Hill. Just adjacent to White Rock Lake is a road leading to the infamous Flagpole Hill, the rumored location of a band of rock-hurdling poltergeists. Yep, you heard that right, they just throw rocks at you. Passerbys report driving through the area late at night only to be pelted by a rain of pebbles. When they got out of the car to chase down the culprits, there were none to be found. Local legend identifies the ghost as 3 restless spirits tangled in the dark history of the area. According to the story, a construction worker ended their own life in the house on Flagpole Hill before its completion, and a hired hitman was later convicted of taking out the couple who occupied it. Now, don't think just because you're not in a car, you're safe. Those walking on foot rather than driving past seem to be just as unlucky. Hikers and other residents of the area have reported an unseen assailant pelting them with rocks as they pass by. Sounds like this place really rocks. Get it? Because so funny. Number 4. The Millermore Mansion. Located in Dallas Heritage Village is Millermore Mansion. It was completed in 1857 and was the home of William Brown Miller, who served in the Confederate Army. This beautiful home is said to be haunted by an unidentified lady ghost who always seems to lurk near the nursery. Now, the general belief of who the lady is the spirit of a woman named Emma. Now, Emma was the 3rd wife of William Brown Miller, and allegedly everyone who encounters Emma tells a similar story. People see a woman going up the stairs, and they describe the same woman, always wearing a long brown dress. She has been seen in the front foyer, and people claim to have seen her in the middle window where the nursery is. Many Millermore visitors have also reported unexplained cold spots and a distinct feeling of being watched during their visit. Seems like Emma is always watching. Number 3. Sons of Herman Hall. Herman Hall's website marks itself as the oldest freestanding wood structure in Dallas, as well as the oldest bar. And for over 100 years, the hall has held concerts, parties, and dances. So no wonder the dead come back there to party. Both staff members and guests of the hall have reported strange occurrences, especially in late hours of the night. Some guests have seen paintings fly off the wall as thrown by some unseen force. Others have heard footsteps in the hallways and seen doors suddenly slam shut. Guests also claim to hear children laughing, even when no children were present, which is just creepy. Longtime staff members of Herman Hall report sensing a lingering presence and seeing flashes of light and shadow. One particular staff member recounts a time he and some other employees saw a couple dressed in Victorian-era clothing walk past them and go upstairs, but about 30 minutes later, when the couple hadn't returned, the staff went upstairs to find all the doors locked and no one inside them. I just think these ghosts want to return to their party days, though. Number 2. Goatman's Bridge. Goatman's Bridge, more formally known as the Old Alton Bridge in Argyle. Dating back to the 1930s, locals have told tales of the specter of a strange half-man, half-goat creature lurking beneath the bridge. The Goatman is said to stand over 7 feet tall with big horns and glowing red eyes, which to me just sounds like the devil, but I mean, hey, Goatman is a cool name. Some believe the Goatman remains dormant for years at a time and awakes only to hunt for prey. Now, the Goatman isn't the only spirit on this bridge, as to keep him company is another spirit, that of a young mother crying out eternally for her lost child. Residents making their way over the bridge late at night have reported hearing her ghostly wails. Some say the 2 ghosts are connected, and that years ago the Goatman stole the young woman's baby. When she found out, she threw herself from the bridge, and her spirit has haunted it ever since. Now, I already don't like bridges because of heights and being over bodies of water, but being on a haunted bridge, No thank you. And coming in at number 1 is Miss Molly's Hotel. Located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Miss Molly's Hotel is a little deceiving. In the lawless pioneer days of the Old West, Miss Molly's operated as a bordello, making working girls and their customers among the most common apparitions to appear here. One such customer even has a room named after him, the Cowboy Room, where he has been frequently spotted by guests and staff of the hotel. His name is Jake the Cowboy, and when Paula Goins became manager of Miss Molly's, she had no clue that it was haunted. After months, she reported that strange things started happening, and she eventually saw Jake herself. She said, "I saw him in full body. He walked into a room and shut the door behind him, and I went up and knocked on the door and opened the door and no one was there. That is when I knew that something was up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm not crazy." Another ghost there is assumed to be a former madame by the name of Josie King. Some suspect that she oversaw the house during its bordello days. Josie is seen a lot, usually at 3 a.m. at the foot of the bed, and allegedly Josie likes to watch people sleep. No thanks. Guests can also look at the hotel's collection of creepy photographs or listen to eerie audio recordings captured through the years.
Starting us off at number 10, the Elder Street Artist Lofts. Formerly a hospital, it's no surprise to anyone that these lofts are believed to be one of the most haunted locations in Houston, Texas. But it's not for the reason you may think. While of course many died in the hospital during its operation, as is totally normal, the paranormal experiences have to do with the
With the help of Snapchat, we've been able to reach our monthly active user and revenue goals every single month. Snapchat is
fact that the hospital was built over a cemetery where roughly 3,000 Civil War and yellow fever victims were buried, along with countless slaves. And isn't that just a recipe for disaster? At the time of construction, there was a ton of controversy as people were understandably concerned about building on top of a cemetery. So to ease the town, they built the basement above ground and left the graves undisturbed. Apparently, many graves were actually relocated as well, but there was no formal sweep for remains, so who knows what was left behind. As many in the town predicted, their efforts to build on top of dead bodies did not evade the inevitable spirits from rising into the building. And over the years, many have reported sightings of strange, shadowy figures and feelings of being watched, only to see that no one is there. Now, many actually live in these apartments today, but let me tell you, I don't care how nice these lofts are, you couldn't pay me to live in a building where ghosts were known to roam around the halls. Next up at number 9, Al Engineering Building. Back in 1959, a man named Roy Sims, who was an instructor at the university, made a grave mistake that changed his life forever. Back then, it was known as the Animal Industries Building and was home to the meat locker where students would learn how to properly butcher animals. Now, this particular day, Roy went down into the basement where the meat locker was to get some work done alone. Once down there, he started carving up a pig for some bacon when suddenly the knife in his hand slipped and punctured his thigh right in his femoral artery. Alone and bleeding out, some say he dragged himself across the floor towards the elevator before he died, leaving a long trail of blood behind him. It's believed that he haunts the building to this day, with reports of people hearing strange noises and screams coming from the basement. Some have even seen apparitions or strange objects moving along the wall, and sometimes even finding unexplained dark stains on the floor of the building. Believe it or not, some janitors have even requested to be reassigned to different areas of the building out of fear for the terrifying things they've witnessed. So enter if you dare, as the basement continues to haunt all that dare to try. Next up at number 8, the Miller Moore Mansion. Once home to wealthy plantation owners in 1861, this Dallas mansion saw more death in its lifetime than you can imagine. The mansion was owned by one William Brown Miller, and while living there, he married, divorced, and then remarried another 3 times. Sadly, 2 of Miller's wives died tragically. His second wife, Minerva, died of an unknown illness, and Emma died while in childbirth. It seems that these souls, among many others, others never left the mansion and can be found terrifying all who dare to visit. Guests and staff have reported feelings of being watched in the master bedroom and strange sudden drops in temperature even in the hot summer months. Visitors say they can hear babies' screams coming from the nursery and the sound of a crib being dragged into the master bedroom. But like magic, once the crib reaches the master, suddenly the baby's cries stop immediately. And if that wasn't enough to spook you, there have been countless reports of crows flying into the glass of windows only to find ghostly appearance of a face appear. Could it be the ghost of Emma trying to care for her baby they hear? You certainly won't see me sticking around long enough to find out. Next up at number 7, the White Sanitarium. Located in Wichita Falls, the White Sanitarium, also commonly known as the Old Insane Asylum, opened in 1926 under the direction of Frank White, but became abandoned sometime in the 1950s. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea of a haunted abandoned asylum just sounds like the start of a horror movie. I mean, it's not like the people that were sent off to live in asylums have great quality of life, and if they died there, I'm sure they had a vengeance. It is rumored that very strange experiments were conducted in the asylum, which many believe to be the root cause of the hauntings, as they believe these procedures killed many of the patients. Visitors and passers-by have reported hearing children screaming from the building, mysterious lights turning on when there was no electricity connected to the building, and a strange woman in white roaming the grounds and peering through windows, watching all that dare to walk past. Coming in at number 6, Presidio La Bahia. If there is one place that you can certainly guarantee will be haunted by spirits, it's a battlefield. In 1747, the fortress known as Presidio La Bahia was built near the San Antonio River, and it would later become the infamous place of revolutionary conflicts like the Battle of Goliad and the Goliad Massacre. As you can imagine, many soldiers died on these grounds, so it's not hard to imagine how it got its reputation as a terrifying haunted fortress. During the Goliad Massacre in 1836, 341 Texan troopers were executed by the Mexican army, and it's believed that it's these soldiers that died in battle that can be heard crying out in terror as you walk the grounds today. Visitors have reported full body apparitions all around the property, as well as hearing strange conversations in Spanish coming from thin air. The strange wailing has been caught on audio recordings, and that is enough for me to want to leave this place alone for good. The last thing I need is to be haunted by a revolutionary soldier. Coming in at number 5, the Emily Morgan Hotel. Built in 1924 in San Antonio, Texas, the building was originally designed to be a medical arts building. Complete with a crematorium and morgue, it was known to house hundreds of doctors and was considered one of the best hospitals one could visit. That was until it closed in 1976 and became an office building, and then just 10 years later, a hotel. Today, those who work at the hotel tell frequent stories of the terrifying encounters they've had, specifically in the basement. What is now the basement of the hotel was the crematorium and morgue in its days as a hospital, and it seems whoever was left in that morgue all those years ago is not yet finished with that building or anyone who dares enter. Employees claim to have seen orbs, heard screams, and been greeted by the smell of burning flesh. But it's not just the basement that will leave you running for the hills. Apparently, the 7th floor is known to have its fair share of scary spectacles. Allegedly haunted by the ghost of a bride, no one knows what her connection is to the building, but many have come into contact with her. Guests have been known to check out in the middle of the night after hearing blood-curdling screams and seeing her reflection in the mirror. And most frightening of all is that some say they've actually seen her walk through walls. So save yourself the sleepless nights and trauma and just book a different hotel if you ever plan to visit San Antonio. Coming in at number 4, the Magnolia Hotel. Back in 1840, a Texas Ranger named James Campbell built a log cabin that later expanded into a hotel. Now, this little hotel turned out to be a fairly successful little business right up until the early 1900s. But that is where where the story gets dark. Most are not surprised by the haunting of the building, as not long after the log cabin was built, Campbell, the ranger who built it, was killed, leaving the property.
Meet Milo. He's part border collie, part terrier.
Completely abandoned. With no one to oversee the property, who knows what shady people made their way in, or worse, who didn't make it out. When it was purchased in 2013 by a couple looking to bring the building back to life, it did not take them long to figure out that this place was horrifyingly haunted. The couple said they began experiencing supernatural events as soon as repairs commenced, and claimed to have heard doors slamming out of nowhere, witnessing shadowy outlines hovering in doorways, and even have photos showing strange figures climbing out of mirrors. Ugh. Since its doors opened to the public, visitors from all around the world have experienced the same strange paranormal occurrences, and there have been hundreds of accounts from people saying they saw furniture move on its own and hearing strange voices when no one was around. To date, Magnolia Hotel is known to be haunted by at least 13 different spirits, but those are just the ones they've found. The real number is assumed to be much higher. Next up at number 3, Littlefield House. Although the outside may look like a beautiful fairy castle, don't let that fool you. Located in Austin, the Littlefield House is a terrifying mansion said to be haunted by Alice Littlefield, the former mistress of the house. As legend goes, Alice and George Littlefield were a beloved couple throughout all of Austin. They couldn't have their own children, but cared deeply for their nieces and nephews and paid for all 29 of them to go to university. But not all was so perfect behind closed doors. When George would leave the house to run errands, he would lock Alice in the attic, fearing she would be kidnapped in his absence and wanting to keep her safe. Well, naturally, as being locked in an attic does to a person, she began to become hysterical, and her fear of being kidnapped and killed that was instilled by her husband slowly started to drive her mad. George then died before Alice, and it seems she slipped further into hysteria until her own death. Now Alice is known to haunt the mansion, where inexplicable sounds and shrieks can be heard echoing through the house, along with stomping feet darting up and down the stairs. If you listen closely, you just might hear her playing the piano, waiting for her husband to return. Coming in at number 2, the DeSoto Hotel. Located in El Paso, the DeSoto Hotel has been the subject for many paranormal investigations through the years. The hotel has been around for over 100 years, and if you ask the locals, they prefer not to speak of it, as many get the creeps just by thinking about it. There are 3 spirits that are known to haunt the halls of the DeSoto Hotel, and investigators have captured some truly creepy evidence over the years. One of the spirits, known as the shadow in the doorway, has been captured on video lurking in the hotel's abandoned hallways, while another spirit, who's been named Sarah, is known to creepily laugh and giggle as you walk through the building. But the one you really need to be afraid of is the spirit that lives in the basement. It seems like nothing good ever happens in old creepy basements, and the DeSoto Hotel is no different. Rumored to have been used for satanic rituals in its early days as a hotel, whatever is down there does not want you to visit. While some believe the entity to be a restless spirit incapable of controlling their anger, some are convinced it's a demon. Employees and investigators have reported being pinched, growled at, scratched, hit, and even bitten by whatever is down there, and investigators have even captured what sounds like a demon answering questions on an EVP. Let's just hope that whatever is down there stays in the basement and doesn't start wandering through the rest of the building. Who knows what dangers could happen then. And coming in at number 1, the Old Park Hotel. Built back in 1886 as a lodging for cowboys in the Ballinger area, the Old Park Hotel has had a wide variety of purposes over the years, including a schoolhouse, a courthouse, and most famously, a brothel. Now a B&B and antique store you can go and see for yourself, but visitors beware, as the previous owner has reportedly identified 30 different entities present in the hotel, and it's no doubt that you'll start to experience strange paranormal sensations as soon as you enter. Patrons have reported having entire conversations with women in costume who they believe to be staff, only for them to disappear suddenly without a trace. But the worst and most scary is the spirit of the cowboy. Known to be a very angry spirit, the cowboy has been witnessed by countless guests as well as caught on camera standing menacingly in the doorway holding what appears to be a pistol. But that's not all. One paranormal investigator looking for more information on the cowboy came by and left a piece of equipment in the room to monitor the spirit. He left to go downstairs to monitor, but when he heard a large crash from upstairs, he rushed back up, only to find it completely smashed and destroyed all over the floor. Not only that, but there have been many accounts of people feeling touched or tugged or even being pushed down the stairs when no one was around them. In fact, some investigators have been so traumatized that they've checked out in the middle of the night, never to return again. Now, if a spirit can scare an investigator, then that's all the convincing I need to stay as far away as possible.
Coming in at number 10, the Devil's Tramping Ground. This scary site is located about 10 miles from Siler City in Chatham County, North Carolina. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a strange footpath that forms a circle 40 feet in diameter. Locals claim that this is where Satan himself walks to contemplate his evil deeds. The path is completely free of vegetation, and the only thing that will grow inside the ring is tough clumps of grass. Apparently, even sticks left in the pathway are cleared away by the following morning. There are a few other stories of where the circle may have come from. Some folks claim that the area was a meeting for Cherokee people who made the circle bear with dances. Others link the site to the lost colony of Roanoke, and scientists have tried to explain it as being a former molasses mill. Whatever you think may be the case, visitors have claimed to see red glowing eyes in the circle. If that doesn't sound evil, I don't know what else could. If it is the devil's place to think, he sure does do a lot of thinking. I wonder why this spot in particular. There is a scenic byway named Devil's Tramping Ground Road, and it's free to travel, but the actual site is currently located on private property. Number 9, Paint Rock. You can find this location near the Tennessee border and the small town of Hot Springs. Paint Rock is considered one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. It has been a landmark for eons, and it features one of the best examples of Native American pictographs in the state. There is a figure of a lone Cherokee man that has been seen walking through the forest near Paint Rock, but that's not the scary part. What makes this one of the most haunted places is more about the famous body of water it overlooks. Legend has it that singing maidens there have lured many men to their demise. These maidens sound like something straight out of Harry Potter, and I'd love to know what it is that lured the men in. Do we think they sang, gave them an offer they couldn't refuse, or did they just put these unlucky men into a trance? So many things I'd love to know about the maidens without going anywhere near the water. You can still visit Paint Rock today and check out the Native American history, but I think I'll stick to Google Images personally. Number 8, Demon Dog. Located in the small Blue Ridge mountain town of Valle Criscus, which is Latin for Valley of the Cross, because the town has 2 streams that meet at right angles in the middle of the valley. Close by, there's
You were such a good listener, Thomas. It makes me feel so special.
You are special. If you don't mind, if you could just...
This makes me feel really special, too, because, you know, Discover's giving me cash back on debit, not just credit.
Actually, Discover gives cash back on debit to everyone.
Everybody?
Everyone. Buddy, if you could just...
What about Debbie John? All those years that I couldn't find my bike, it was in her garage. Like, she gets it.
If she has Discover cashback debit, then yeah.
Introducing Discover Cashback Debit, a checking account with cashback for everyone.
old stone church that sits near Highway 184. According to the legend, if you drive past the church's graveyard at night, of course it's at night, a black dog will jump out from behind a gravestone and start chasing your car. I don't know about you all, but for me, being chased is immediately 100 times scarier. Apparently, no matter how fast you drive, the dog will keep pace. There are many stories of people being chased by the dog. In some, it has red eyes, in other, it has yellow. But the thing that remains the same in every story is that the only way to get the dog to stop chasing you is if you cross the bridge nearby where the two streams cross. This is not an official tourist attraction like some others on the list, but the cemetery is free to visit in case you wanted to test out the story yourself. At number 7, the Duke Mansion. This terrifying site is located in Charlotte's Myers Park neighborhood. The Duke Mansion was built in 1915 as the home for James Duke of Duke University and Duke Energy. However, the property was briefly owned by John Avery in the 1920s, which is when the paranormal happening reportedly began. The story starts after Avery's wife was hospitalized for severe mental health issues. The lonely John began renting a room to a young writer, Maggie, who he, shocker, ended up falling in love with. However, Avery refused to leave his wife, resulting in Maggie to break off their affair. Before Maggie left, Avery was able to get her to promise to meet him at the home 1 year later, dead or alive. So a year later, Maggie showed up and waited until it was almost midnight when a flash of lightning illuminated a figure of a man watching her from the window, so Maggie rushed in the door. The house appeared to be empty, but she made her way to the library. Just as the clock struck 12, she heard footsteps on the staircase and Avery appeared just in time. As the two reached out for one another, his hand went right through hers. Avery then said, dead or alive. It turned out that Avery had actually passed a few days earlier, and a letter revealed him worried if he would be able to make it to the meeting. Very cute, but still super haunted. Number 6, the Great Dismal Swamp. Just with the name alone, you know this place isn't going to have a nice backstory. The Great Dismal Swamp encompasses more than 100,000 acres straddling the boundary of North Carolina and Virginia. It was home to Native Americans over 13,000 years ago, and George Washington tried to convert the wetlands into farmlands. Though pretty, the swamp is dangerous and spooky. Along with the wild animals, including snakes, the swamp is deep and hard to get out of. Many have drowned in the water, and mysterious lights have been seen in the forest gliding over the water. Hunters have even lost bears and deers, claiming they disappeared without a trace. The most famous tale from the swamp, however, is that of 2 Native American lovers. The woman passed before they could wed and was buried in the swamp. The man later drowned because he swore he could see his love in a white canoe. Now the pair can reportedly be seen from time to time paddling on Lake Drummond together. It sounds like this swamp holds far more than just a poor couple, and I think I'm okay without knowing. At number 5, Cedar Grove Cemetery. The Cedar Grove Cemetery, located in New Bern, was established in 1800 in response to the yellow fever epidemic, already starting off strong in the creepy department. Apparently, during the epidemic, so many people passed that at night trenches were dug in the churchyard in a line near the adjoining property, and the bodies were buried there indiscriminately. That sounds like the perfect recipe for a lot of forgotten and angry spirits looking for revenge. Then, after 1802, the cemetery became the major New Bern burial ground. Now the cemetery holds North Carolina's most influential citizens from the 19th and 20th century. The thing Cedar Grove may be best known for is the looming black entrance arch. Legend has it that if the arch weeps or bleeds its sticky rust-colored ooze, I have to add that is how it was described in the article I read, and I mean, what a description. If you get oozed on by the arch, apparently you will soon be the one needing a spot to be buried. I don't know what the sticky rust-colored ooze could be coming from a stone arch, other than some powerful supernatural stuff, so I think I'll definitely never be going there ever at all. At number 4, the Grove Park Inn. Considered the frightful jewel of the haunted Asheville, North Carolina, the Grove Park Inn has one guest that requires no checkout. The most famous apparition is called the Pink Lady. Although the ghost remains unidentified, it's believed that she was a young woman who fell 5 stories from room 545 to the Palm Court atrium back in 1920. According to the many stories of guests encountering the Pink Lady, it seems to me she's not a shy girl. One contractor who was repairing the room felt a presence. This gave him the chills, but his last straw was when he felt a tugging on his ear. Apparently, he ran out of the room was scared and never returned. Now that construction worker knows what's up. Any character in a horror movie needs to be more like him. Since then, many guests have reported encounters with the Pink Lady, most of which involve being touched by her. Oh, so the Grove Park Inn can quite literally make my nightmares come true. The general consensus seems to be that she is gentle, but I don't know, gentle or not, she's still a ghost touching me. Number 3, the Biltmore Estate. After a young George Washington Vanderbilt visited Asheville, North Carolina, his mother fell in love with the surrounding mountains. The historic estate was then built in the late 1800s on approximately 125,000 acres of land purchased by Vanderbilt. He established an impressive art and artifact collection and a library full of rare editions. In 1914, he passed, and his grandsons immediately inherited the estate, which they then turned into a tourist attraction. During his life, Vanderbilt loved to spend time in his Biltmore Library when storms rolled in, and apparently he continues to enjoy it in his afterlife. Visitors of the estate have reported seeing a shadowy figure in the room when the weather turns gloomy. Even as a ghost, he still had style. Only coming out in the gloomy weather adds to the spookiness of it all. He's not the only one who still enjoys the house. The ghost of his wife Edith is also known to visit her husband there, with many guests reporting hearing her whisper, "George." Staff members have also said that the Biltmore Library is one of the most haunted places in all of North Carolina. They've heard eerie sounds of a party with clinking glasses, laughter, and